Well, greetings, and let me welcome you to today's webinar. My name is Dwayne Butcher of Lean Frontiers, and it's my distinct pleasure to serve as your host today. I'm particularly excited about this webinar because it marks the first in a series of webinars that we're going to conduct over the next year as we highlight how Lean is being used to better the lives of individuals, communities, and the world. We're calling this series Lean for Good. We would be remiss to not mention that this is really born out of a number of conversations with a whole bunch of individuals over the last several years, as well as with our friends at LEI. There's so many great things happening in the Lean community in this area, and we're simply here hopefully trying to shed light on just a few of them. What's been clear to us in the Lean community is that those in the Lean community are naturally driven to think along these lines of Lean for Good because of one of our core values, which we all know is respect for people. So this series is going to focus on how Lean is being applied in NGOs, in government organizations, in social enterprises, where any number of great things are taking place. Things from relief in housing and financial crisis, local outreaches like food banks, areas of systemic poverty like we see in Africa, and even in areas affecting the planet. And many more things that are obviously too numerous to list. So there's a lot of great things happening in the Lean community, and we're hoping to begin shedding light on some of those through this series. So today we're going to bring to you three presentations or stories, if you will. And interestingly enough, while we didn't necessarily plan for this, it kind of worked out to where there's going to be some connection to Africa in each of these stories. Our presenters during our session today are going to be Andrew Paris of World Vision International. And then here with me, physically in my office, is Jim Huntzinger from Lean Frontiers, and we have Lynn Asbury from Jubilee Village. And you'll hear more from these individuals in just a moment. First, we are going to attempt to field any questions that come in, so please feel free to submit questions using the GoToWebinar toolbar that you have on your screen. The earlier you can submit those, the more likely we will be able to address them on the call. So first up, joining us from the West Coast, where it's earlier than it is here in Indiana, our current location, Andrew has been working with World Vision International for 7 years. Up until a year ago, he lived in Kenya with his family for 3 years. And he has a PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT, where he got his start with Lean. As part of the Lean Aircraft Initiative. He has spent 11 years with Lockheed Martin working on the Atlas rocket program. So Andrew, that's quite a journey from working with rockets to spending some time in Africa. So why don't you kick things off here and begin our presentation, and I will make you the presenter so you can take over from here.
Great, thank you very much. And good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone. I'm looking forward to sharing with you briefly about how we've used Lean within World Vision to help us fight poverty. I'll talk about, for those of you who are not familiar, introduce you to World Vision, who is World Vision, and then discuss how Lean has helped us fight poverty, specifically what we did in East Africa, and encourage you to join the fight against poverty. So who is World Vision? World Vision is a Christian relief, development, and advocacy organization. So the relief part means we are in Nepal when there's an earthquake, we're in Haiti, we're in South Sudan and the conflict that's going on there, Middle East, wherever there's conflict, we're responding to that, also helping people prepare for it in advance. Development means we're community development in a community for 15 to 18 years, walking with the community, helping them out of poverty. And then we're also advocating for the poor and with the poor, because often the causes of poverty are outside the individual community. We work with children, families, and communities, although our focus is on the well-being of children, to overcome poverty and injustice and help them live life in all its fullness. In 2013, we had 2.7 billion revenue. It's roughly flat for 2014. And we have over 45,000 staff in nearly 100 countries. So we're actually one of the largest NGOs in the world, and we are in quite a number of areas where we're desperately needed. So I want to focus briefly on what we call transformational development. This slide here is based on a book called Walking with the Poor by World Vision senior leader Brian Myers. And this talks to our approach to community development. And if you pay close attention and you're a lean person, you'll realize that some of these ideas are very similar to how we go about doing lean in an organization. Basically, we don't come in and tell a community what to do, but we join their story and we walk with the poor. What does that mean? We walk with them to recover their identity as beloved children of God, and to discover their vocation as participants in helping bring their community out of poverty into life in all its fullness. We work with them to promote just and peaceful relationships. Part of our role is bringing hope and helping them develop a vision of what they want life to be like. We take great effort to build within the community the capacity for change. We work with them to identify and solve problems at the root cause. And our goal, of course, is always to facilitate lasting transformation within the community. But in this work that we do, common to many organizations, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, or government, we have unpredictable problems and crises. It takes too long to hire people. People have to travel long distances. Maybe you don't have the poor terrain that we have in Africa and other parts of the world, but we also have long travel distances. Sometimes materials are too expensive. We have maybe too many approvals required to get something accomplished. And often our processes are not defined well. And that leads to waste, variation, and frustration. But the good news is that these are the types of things, exactly the types of things that Lean is so well suited to help us address and overcome. So when we think about lean transformation in a for-profit organization, typically what we think about is increased market share, greater profit, higher shareholder value. But when you think about what does lean transformation, what does process excellence mean for an organization like World Vision, it means that we're able to achieve our objectives better. And that means things like more girls going to school, more children are immunized, more children are protected, and more clean water. So all the things that World Vision is working on, bringing life in all its fullness, those are the things that we are achieving through our work as we transform our organization with Lean. Process excellence. So when I came to World Vision from the corporate world, from Lockheed Martin, I brought with me a tool set and a way of thinking that you all are familiar with, Lean. Also had experience with Six Sigma, business process management, theory of constraints, and other approaches that we come from the corporate world. And I quickly learned that there are different priorities, there are unique aspects about an NGO, and World Vision in particular. So I spent time trying to understand what were the World Vision core principles, our partnership values, our strategic mandates, the way in which we went about bringing transformation. And I wanted to develop something that would speak to the World Vision audience, the World Vision, these 45,000 folks in World Vision. And what I came up with the help of a number of other people is 5 elements of what I call process excellence. And these are effective, that the processes that we use are effective in their impact, that they are efficient in their performance, that they are appropriate to the context, that they are empowering to stakeholders, and finally that they're continuously improving. You see the bottom 2 are kind of more focused on the World Vision, NGO, humanitarian world, and the upper ones are more kind of from the corporate world, but together they really provide a powerful vision for helping us understand together the type of processes that we're working towards. I'm not going to go into it now because it's a slightly different subject, but at the very end of the presentation, if you want to download it, there is some more detail, another 2 levels of detail of what this specifically looks like in World Vision. And the process excellence goal, or you could say the lean goal that we have, will be familiar to, I think anyone could put this for their processes as well, and is to deliver the greatest value with the fewest resources at the right time and in the right way. So I'd like to talk now about what we did in East Africa, how lean helped us fight poverty in East Africa. If you want to get more information, more detail, there's a link here that provides some additional resources on that. But in a nutshell, what we did was we trained with Lean and Six Sigma 56 green belts and also 11 black belts, and I'll talk more about them in a moment. Those black belts ended up being the process improvement leads for their office. So those are the ones who are working to continue rolling out Lean, to continue to engage the senior leadership, continue to identify and see that projects are undertaken, and that we're also trying to transform our culture. We trained about 450 staff and leaders. I call it Energized because it's about a 6-7 hour training that I developed called Process Excellence Energizer. And I made a point to, in the 9 offices, 9 countries that we have in East Africa, I've trained the senior leadership teams in each of those offices, as well as every time we did a workshop, we would train the people in the workshop, and we've had other trainings as well to begin to get the culture going. And that's about 7.5% of the World Vision population in East Africa. So it is a substantial part. We made have made many improvements, and I only have documented complete project documentation for 33 process improvement projects, 32 smaller. We made a Betters, which follows the documentation there is just a 1-page, follows the A3 format. A number of other projects have been undertaken, not all have been fully documented. I haven't received documentation for all, but those are the ones that I have documentation for. We have documented actual cost reductions of over $1.5 million per year, mostly in supply chain related areas. In the processes where we have made it a target to reduce span time, we've reduced that by an average of 59%. And we've also contributed to things like reducing underspending, transforming our culture, improving our reputation, and that has also helped us mobilize resources. Now, the thing about underspending, in the corporate world, maybe a company will be glad that you spend less so that you have more profit, but in fact for us, when a donor gives us money to spend, underspending is not a good thing, because it typically means that we have poor processes and we're not able to hire people on time or get things done on time. So actually reducing underspending in our world is quite an important thing and quite an achievement. This is the group of black belts. You can see I'm there, the 4th one from the right, and the 2nd from the left is Prashant, who is a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt in India, and came over as a volunteer and gave us our first week of black belt training. But these are the folks who are who are carrying the torch, so to speak, in East Africa. And I'd like to share with you very briefly just a couple stories about 3 of them to give you a sense of some of the things that they are doing, because in fact all these improvements that I mentioned on the last page, they weren't my projects, they were the projects of these individuals and a handful of others. So the first one I'd like to introduce you to is my good friend Abebe Nigatu. He's actually the Human Resources Director in World Vision Ethiopia. On the left, he's there with my son Daniel a few years ago. Abebe worked for the government of Ethiopia in business process reengineering, and before coming to World Vision, when he learned about Lean and Kaizen, he was really appreciative of what it brings and said, wow, this is something what we need in the government more than the BPR, which can get some dramatic results but is not sustainable. Abebe championed 6 process improvement projects in human resources and in finance, and one of the greatest success stories is how in recruitment we took and this is actually measured impact, we took the average time to recruit new employees from about 130 days down to 41 days. And that was partly a result of a workshop and the implementation, as well as continuous improvement after that. And this, of course, helps us hire people more quickly to get our work done on time so that we can reduce our underspend. Darine is from Burundi. She was our process improvement lead there. She took the lead role in a procurement project that resulted in $140,000 annual cost reduction. That one project actually was ended up being the model for the rest of the projects in procurement that we did in East Africa, and as well as other parts of the World Vision Partnership have taken that model, and she actually even went down to South Africa region and shared with them what she had done in her office. She is a go-getter. She makes things happen. Even though Burundi is one of our smallest offices, there were more projects completed and documented than any other office, and that was 16. She, at the moment, is not with World Vision. She's with, I think, Food for the Hungry, but she has started to apply visual management in food distribution in South Sudan, which is, she described it to me the other day. It's very exciting to see how some very simple visual methods are helping streamline how food can be distributed in South Sudan. And the good news is that Doreen is coming back to World Vision. She'll be taking on a role in West Africa in the next couple of months. And the last of my black belts I'd like to talk about is Eric Jishure in Kenya. He is a finance officer, and he tells of how before he made process improvements to the work that he did, he was typically working overtime, an hour or so a day. After improvements, he was typically finishing his work around 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon and having time to do further improvement projects. In fact, he's been so successful in the things that he's done, he was asked to take on a 6-month assignment with our food programming and management unit to reduce costs to us more competitive in our work for the World Food Program and others. And Eric is also, so he's now traveling and he's training others and facilitating process mapping improvement workshops. Really a great example of the things that we can do with Lean. And wanted to wrap up the presentation with a brief, with one slide on helping you to think, helping Lean practitioners to think how could they join this fight against poverty. So when we think about corporate social responsibilities, we think of the things that a corporation, large organization can do to fulfill their obligation, kind of being a good Samaritan to the rest of the world, to their neighbors. And there are environmental things that they can do to become more sustainable. There are things that they can do to make their workplace a better place for the employees. They obviously have a responsibility to generate profit for shareholders, and I think also to share some of that with the communities around them. But there's another option that I wanted to talk about, and that's what we've started partnering with others in World Vision, which is a partnership between an organization, or it could simply be an individual who's a lean practitioner, with an NGO or with a nonprofit organization to build their capacity. Many of you probably are familiar with the Meals Per Hour video and project that Toyota Production Systems Service Center here in the U.S., where they helped a food bank in New York streamline some of their operations. But this is basically what we did as we put together organized our black belt training through an organization called Hansha. Some of you may be familiar with them. Sammy Ibarra of Hansha, which is a Toyota alumni organization, helped us find volunteers who came for a week. World Vision took care of their travel expenses, but they basically donated a week of their time to come and provide a week of black belt training and also some facilitation. Now, the thing that's exciting about this goes back to the old parable, or the old illustration of give a man a fish and he will eat for a day, teach him to fish and he will eat for a lifetime. Because by coming to a nonprofit or an NGO, what you're really doing is teaching us to fish. You are giving us skills, giving us vision, giving us the ability to reduce costs, to reduce cycle time, to eliminate waste, rather than simply giving us, which is also appreciated, the money to get the work done. But in teaching us to fish and teaching us lean and helping us with that lean transformation, you're really helping us to transform as an organization, which has greater and more lasting impact. So with that, I want to just leave you with a couple thoughts. The first one is encourage everyone to dream of a better world, to join in the fight, and to get involved and make a difference. And I thank you for your attention here. There's my email address. You're welcome to get in touch with me and learn more about what we're up to. Thank you.
Well, Andrew, thanks for taking a few moments to share your story there. I'm sure you could take a much more expanded amount of time and share the many experiences you've had, but we certainly appreciate you giving us some of the highlights. So next up, we have Jim Huntzinger. Jim is president of Lean Frontiers, was introduced to lean thinking, I guess we could say more than 20 years ago when he worked with Ice and Seiki, a Toyota group company, and since then has been learning and applying lean in many organizations. Jim is author of lean accounting books and one on TWI, and has launched a multitude of conferences under Lean Frontiers banner to support the lean community. Jim has also spent some time in Africa. So Jim, why don't you share a little bit about your story and your time in Zambia?
Thanks, Dwayne, and hello everybody. Yeah, what I want to do today is just kind of basically, I guess, share a story of the, as Dwayne said, of the time I've spent, myself and my kids have spent in Zambia, and to give you a little background on how it came about. The first time we went over there was in August 2009, and then again in August 2013. But we went over there and we were visiting some actually friends, close friends of our family there that are actually missionaries in Africa, John and Kendra Enright. And they're not your typical missionaries. I mean, of course, they do have a very nice training center, the Kafakumba Training Center, which they use for a pasture school, which John's father started in Congo in 1950. And they also have, family development programs and family activities and other events that they do there. But a lot of their main focus in the last 15 years or so have been really setting up indigenous economic development. And from the beginning, for many years, John always said to me and others, but he said the problem with Africa and Africans is they've been saved too many times. Well, his point is it's one thing to convert them to Christianity, but when this happens and they simply go back to their life of, destitution and poverty and, witchcraft type culture beliefs, overall, not necessarily a lot is accomplished. What he discovered, and this was his time in Congo, was that what they really need is a robust economy, a way to earn a living for themselves, their family, their community, and even their country. And this is exactly what he and Kendra have been working on, particularly the last 15 years, and have certainly made a very significant impact, economically in the area where they are and even spiritually. And certainly John, as I said, is no stranger to what it takes to make a dramatic difference with the culture and economic change needed in Africa. As they said, his parents were missionaries that went to Congo, which is actually along the northern border of Zambia in 1950. So John spent his entire life there with these people and their culture and knows it firsthand. And they have a number of economic development projects. A number of them are in manufacturing. And that's where I spent my time when I first went over there in 2009. As I talked with John over the years as he's setting up these manufacturing ventures. I said, John, starting things up, we need to make them lean. We need to use the lean business model. And John kept saying, well, great, come over here and let's work on that. And so I finally did 2009. My point with him is I'll definitely come, but I wanted my kids to get old enough that they'd be able to go along with me and be able to absorb what they saw and what we were doing. So we did that. And where I spent most of my time in all the different businesses and activities they had was in their beehive operation, where they're manufacturing beehives for a variety of reasons. And what was interesting is we started doing some work in their little beehive operation. Obviously, it's in the middle of the Zambian bush, and it's very primitive by Western standards. That is, it was housed originally in a very simple building, no walls, just a roof, I guess, if that's what you could call it, with simple processes and equipment, and a pretty simple product as well. But what's interesting is the issues they were dealing with and the problems were the same as any manufacturing operation in the U.S. or anywhere. They naturally were using batch production and always had a shortage of something. They also continued to have lots of inventory of everything except specific components they need to finish the parts. So even though they were producing stuff, they really couldn't output anything consistently. And interestingly enough, on the flight over there the first time, we flew over on a Boeing 777, and at Lean Frontiers, we've been lucky enough to have people from Boeing attend our summits, and even Boeing present at a number of our summits, Lean Accounting Summit. So he knew some inside information on some of the struggles and things they've done with along their lean journey. And I was telling the Zambians in the beehive operation, I said, even though you guys are very small and a pretty simple product, your issues are no different than a company like Boeing with lots of capital investment, lots of people, very sophisticated product. The fundamental problems are exactly the same. So we got to use that as a baseline. So anyway, we worked on developing kind of flow through their process and developing the people, utilizing their knowledge and skills to help make improvements through that. And even though they obviously don't have the bright, well-lit factory like a place like Boeing or other companies over here, they still have the same basic problems. So anyway, I spent a good portion of our time over that first time working with them on and off throughout the couple weeks we were there. I mean, certainly a pretty short time to be helping out. But later, after we came back to the States in that year, 2009, in November, John and Kendra came back to the States for a short visit, and I got to spend some time with them. And he kind of gave me an update on some of the lean progress they had with the beehive manufacturing since I'd been there in August. And I'd left them with just kind of a one-page document spelling out some basic goals and objectives and a short list of activities for them to help move towards adopting some, the lean practices. And it was also simply in a one-page document, a summary of kind of what I explained to them and worked with them when I was there in August. So for the little update on where they were before I got there. So for several months prior to me visiting, the beehive manufacturer had only produced on average 3 beehives a day, and really certainly couldn't get any consistent output. after I talked with John when they came back in November of that year, he told me that they were now consistently producing 55 beehives per day, and were doing it with less people than they had when they were getting very haphazardly 3 beehives out a day. So I was certainly very pleasantly surprised that it exceeded my expectations in just a few months of where I thought they might be. And going through the calculations of some of the information John gave me, their output had increased by 2,200%. So not a bad productivity improvement at all. And they were certainly now on schedule to meet their overall production order for the rest of that year, where prior to August, they were nowhere near being on track for what they had contracted for that year. So anyway, so we'll jump forward a few years, and my kids and I returned back to Zambia in 2013, and in this time the beehive operation had moved to another location, a little bigger facility that didn't have any walls and a little better of a roof overhead with it. And they took advantage of that to move the layout into more favorable flow. And what they got to at this point when I was there was what, at least in my background, we always called fake flow. So fake flow is certainly a very common step for any organization going through an implementation process. It's certainly not one-piece flow like we'd like to see, or I'd like to see them get to, but it's certainly a very good step in the right direction. So fake flow is essentially just making smaller batches more consistently through your process. And in doing that, they actually were now getting consistently 100 beehives per day. So they continued to work on the overall flow and some other improvements, even though it had been, I guess 4 years. As slow as the progress we have here often in our lean implementation, certainly on the continent of Africa, it tends to move even slower. But they had made very substantial progress, and I was happy to see that. There's still much to do to continue moving it forward with the beehive production and integrate a number of the methods and thinking into their manufacturing. I still ultimately want to get them to one-piece flow, but they do plan on continually to work in that direction and take steps to get closer to integrating that. And they've even moved or started doing work on integrating the raw lumber sawmill. They're making it adjacent with their beehive production, and they also have a goal of increasing the daily output to 200 beehives per day, which again, without any increase in personnel, which again would be another substantial productivity improvement. By the time we were done, August 2013, or at least a couple months after that, when I was communicating with John, they improved their productivity over the course of that several years by another approximately 1,500%. So overall, substantial improvements, and again, consistency of output. So that's always good to see. So another thing I'll touch on that I did a little bit of work, like I said, we focused on the beehive operation for most of our effort, was also in their door and window operation. So they have another manufacturing facility where they do make doors and windows, and actually this is some of their original manufacturing they started with. So I spent some time there with a fellow by the name of Bill Bosson, who was he's a former Delphi engineer, and him and his wife had gone over there to Kapakumba to spend about 3 years kind of working and helping them out again from an operational standpoint. So Bill and I spent some time together talking through, what they were working on, and really try to put together a plan to help them achieve some better improvement through the wood shop. One thing Bill had done, which was actually very impressive, that they'd done over there, they'd been able to develop the wood shop to be completely operated under the supervision of local Zambians. So that was truly a significant transition that Bill had helped them gone through at the workshop. And I told him, just in my years in knowing John and Kendra and what they've been working on, I said to me that was nothing short of a miracle in and of itself. So we worked on mapping out a strategy for him and the folks in the wood shop to use to kind of help work on developing some systematic flow through the wood shop, and develop the supervisors and operators and the techniques they're doing on that. Then another activity I did during the August 2013 visit was we actually held a job instruction training class. And in it, we had 8 Zambians who had a variety of supervisory roles in various operations and even businesses at Kafakumba, from fish farming to banana and moringa and aloe vera plantations, from the beehive manufacturing, and also the door and window manufacturing were all represented in the JI class. The class actually was wonderful, and everybody and all the participants were very eagerly engaged in participating in it, learning how to do job breakdowns and job instructions for their jobs. In fact, one of the requirements of the JI class is people bring in a job from their specific work to utilize as we go through the training. And I say this genuinely, I was so utterly impressed with the jobs they brought in for us to use as samples during the class. It was the best group of very, very valid, very legitimate, and very transferable to bring into class jobs I'd seen of any JI class I'd been involved with, over here in the States. From collecting eggs from a fish's mouth, to assembling a door, to extracting pulp from a aloe vera leaf, with, I think in a picture that's up there you can see that particular one. But I was thoroughly impressed, and I enjoyed that, just watching them do their demonstrations as much as anything. So anyway, so certainly doing this JI class, I did it more as I wanted to establish a beachhead for TWI or job instruction with them. There's still a ton more we need to do over there, even just with TWI or JI. It's certainly not going to make them into TWI experts, but just getting some of that base knowledge there, an establishment of a process that can be used, I think is a good starting point for when we go back. And our plan is to go back next summer and to continue working with him on the beehive operation and some of the other activities they have. And another target I want for next year is, real quickly, is there is some other folks there that have developed a school starting with K through some elementary grades, and over the years they keep adding grades as the kids get older up through K through 12. And they've got it up into high school levels now. They've been doing it enough years. And another thing they're doing with the school is they're really trying to make it a transformational school, and they're developing vocational training to go along with the general education. And that's one of the things I want to work on, is having them integrate TWI, job instruction, and other things into this school they have there they're using for the kids in the area, and make that part of the vocational training that they're already working on in that regard. So looking forward to that next year, and hopefully somewhere down the road have more of the story to continue to tell. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. So maybe look forward to a future workshop on how to extract eggs from a fish's mouth from your friends here at Lean Frontiers. Very interesting. I've not heard that specific story. So, well, finally, we have with us Lynn Asbury. Lynn has been involved in an African village for, what? 7 years now. Wow. Called Jubilee Village. As a matter of fact, she just returned last Tuesday, right?
Right.
So officially now, I think, over her jet lag. One of the things that has most impressed me about Lynn, not only the fact that she is now living over there on a part-time basis, actually in the village for a few months at a time, and then she'll be back here in the States for a few months at a time. Not only am I impressed with that, but it's her willingness to learn by doing. And that's certainly one of the most critical things we all talk about as we're trying to learn and apply lean thinking to our operations, is just get busy, learn by doing. And I think Lynn would even admit sometimes learn by failing at times. Very valuable learning opportunities. But nonetheless, she's taking those steps to learn. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Lynn and have her tell us a little bit about her work with Jubilee Village.
Thanks, Dwayne, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to give you a very different perspective this morning, and we've heard about very large operations and then Jim's operation, which is similar to what we do at Jubilee Village Project, but still larger. The project itself began 7 years ago and is a nonprofit NGO with the specific mission of bringing one remote, very, very poor village into sustainability over a period of time. Click. Many of you are probably aware of the Millennium Development Goals, which were established by the United Nations, and we took that really as our charter because there are 8 key areas that must be developed within a village or even a city that contribute to the well-being of the inhabitants there. And my particular area of, I won't say expertise because it wasn't, but I was assigned the task of working in education and also economic development in a very tiny village in remote rural Kenya called Kagera. So we went in 7 years ago with the goal of leaving at the end of 2015. So as you can see, we're almost there. We have 7 more months of work to do. But when we leave, we hope that in many areas we will have brought them to sustainability. We are absolutely working 100% with the villagers to be able to run their own village the way they want to run it, and not just go in and throw funds to a project. So one of the first things that we started talking about was water, because the water situation in most of Africa, and certainly in most of Kenya, is pretty dismal, especially in the remote areas. And can you imagine getting up in the morning and having to carry 42 pounds of water on your head? That is the norm, and this picture was taken about 3 years ago before we had fully implemented the community safe water system. But that was one of the first things that we tackled. It's a holistic ministry, meaning that in the 8 key areas, you really can't do anything in one area without impacting the other. For example, the water issue. The water there, before we had safe water installed, was taken from ponds that were used by all kinds of animals with all kinds of critters. And as a result, you can imagine there were all kinds of stomach issues and lots of attendance issues at school because of stomach issues, because of drinking the bad water. So you really can't touch one thing without touching everything. It is truly holistic. So one of the first things that we did was work within the school system. There are 3 primary schools and 1 secondary school, which wasn't there when we arrived. But we realized early on that if we could just work with the kids and change some of their poor habits, such as drinking bad water and not washing after they went to the latrine, that we probably could make a pretty big impact with their health. So that's what we did. It was called the Oak Club. You can see that bird on their t-shirt. We made a club out of it because in Africa, or Kenya at least, it helps things go smoothly if you give them a t-shirt and they belong to a club. That's just the way it is. But we began teaching them about worms and germs. And at the same time we were doing this, I had just happened to be learning about TWI. So we took an entire week and started using TWI training and showing specifically how these kids could wash their hands correctly. So we had to sort of back up and figure out how we were going to get the water there in the first place, and before that, how we were going to get the water so it was clean. So it really turned, we did an upside down project, we did it backwards, but we were able to successfully use some TWI principles as we did the training. And next, if you want to click it. These are some of the vessels that we used. The beautiful blue one didn't work. It looked great, but it blew over and broke. And the other one worked just fine. Now, I go back frequently to this particular school just to make sure that they are still washing and drying their hands correctly according to what they have been taught. And even after 3 years with the kids graduating out and new kids coming in, they have been able to teach the new ones, and they are using them. I watch them at the latrines. If you want to click and I'll show you how it looks at a latrine. So I watch not only for the kids, but for the teachers. So an interesting thing that happened here is that, as we suspected, the kids got all excited because they started feeling better. Their tummies weren't in a mess all the time. And so they would go home and they would say, Mom, you've got to get some clean water. You need to learn how to wash your hands when you're cooking, and you need to do this and do that. So really the kids led, in this village of about 3,000, the kids led this initiative, and we were actually able to very quickly move this particular sanitation project to all 4 schools. That was a big win for us. And this slide, if you look in the background there, this is at the high school, and that's the kitchen in the back. That's where they cook meals, the luncheon meal, which is porridge usually, for about 200 kids every day. And it occurred to me, that's great. Now we have the teachers and the kids washing their hands and everybody's clean and feeling a lot better. But if the people cooking their food and cleaning their dishes, such as they are, we're not using sanitary methods, then we were really defeating the purpose. So I spent probably a week doing repetitive training, again using TWI. Everything was laid out. Where do you get the water? How do you treat the water? How do you make sure your pans are clean? How do you use tools and make sure that your knives are clean? How does everything dry? How do you keep the animals off what you're doing? How do you keep the bugs out of your pots? All of that. And it really was much more extensive than I thought it would be. But to this day, which is about 3.5 years later, they are still doing it correctly. And I continue to check on it because I want to make sure they never lose that. The impact of this, even though it may sound small, the impact is that they are much more cognizant of worms and germs in their food, and they're careful. They understand now why you wash your hands after you go to the latrine. And so I think it's one of our best wins within the village, at least in my viewpoint. So there's an extension of this. This is the kitchen. It's a home kitchen. It's a Kenyan home kitchen. We also realized we have another large group of women, about 64 women, who have training on solutions for the kitchen, which are alternative to what they're used to. They normally would collect a lot of wood every morning and come in and put a big fire in their hut, and as a result, they would have all kinds of lung issues. Their kids would all have eye issues and lung issues. And we taught them how to use an alternative stove, a UPACI stove, which saves money on purchasing wood. It saves the actual wood, about 80% of it. But in the training with these Joy Kitchen women and how to use their new solutions, we also used TWI, and it came in very handy. The one catch that I have here, and it's an ongoing issue, they don't necessarily look at the pots that they're putting clean water in. We have a safe water community system now, and it's made a huge difference in this village. So the women everybody is within the village is within about half a mile of clean water, a tap. But they take the clean water home, and if they transfer it to a pot that is not clean, then they've lost every benefit. So that's really what this picture is about. I've trained them about 5 times on it, and it hasn't 100% sunk in. So I continue to train. The repetition we are seeing in this village has made all the difference in the world. So I'm hoping that in the short time that this will turn around and they will be able to keep it sanitary. These are just some of the women. I just had to throw this in. These are women who have been trained on how to use the kitchen solutions correctly, who have been trained on washing their hands and all those kinds of things that make a difference. And I told them, you ought to have an attitude about this. And they do. And they're very proud of themselves. This is just one small group. We have 64 women that are broken down into small groups. And they're impacting outside the community, which is exactly what we wanted to have happen. So this picture makes me smile. The other side of what I do is economic development. And this is a wonderful story. Jubilee Spree happened because I just was talking to some women one day sitting under a tree, and in the middle of nowhere, Kenya, this lady leaned over and pulled this big ball of yarn out of her bag and started crocheting. Well, there is no employment, there is no enterprise, nothing at all within the village. So they had no way to make income. And I got the idea, if one lady could do this, why couldn't she teach 29 or 39 other women to make these hats? And so we started making hats, and it was a little bit too successful because they learned very quickly, and before I knew it, I had almost 3,000 hats, which sounds really good because we pay them by the piece at a fair trade rate. But now, what do I do with these hats? So I hand carry these 3,000 hats back to Indiana, where I live, and started getting volunteers in to make each of them a unique kind of hat that would be very attractive to the women, young ladies with young kids here in America, and that's what we did. Click. The downside to this story, and there's some of the women, and they love getting together to crochet, but the downside to this is they produce so many hats that we couldn't get the sales channels up and running fast enough. So this is where the next piece of what I've learned comes in. And this is where I've used kata, and I hope that you're all familiar with kata and what that means. But to me, I took a very simplistic look at what they were doing, and they didn't understand when I said, don't make any more hats. They don't, why can't we make more hats? Because we have too many hats. So I have used a kata demonstration to show them how to think through a solution to the problem we have with too many hats. So we started this last time, and with current condition, which the current condition is we have about 1,000 hats left that need to be sold, and they really only sell well in the colder months. So then we talked about the target condition. The target condition is that we want to have, these women need to have income every single month, and they need to have diversification of products so that we have products being produced there in Kenya that will sell other than just around Christmas time. So in the middle of that is the big, I think Jim calls it the kata egg. And this is where it gets exciting. And even these Kenyan women were excited when we talked about kind of the middle of kata, which is figuring out what to do. And this is where we brainstorm and we talk about innovation. Now we're trying to make words that are American words fit in a Kenyan environment. Trust me when I tell you there is no such word for strategy in Luo, which is their language. And it takes much repetition to get any kind of an idea that's relative to planning or thinking ahead, because honestly, their lives are waking up in the morning and trying to figure out how they're going to live today and where the food is coming from and will their children have food. So taking them to that next step of being able to have a bit of vision and plan is an amazingly challenging task, and one that I love because it lets me try and do different things to come to a solution. So we're in the middle of that kata egg right now. We'll revisit it many times, but the best lesson we've learned are all the bad things that we've done. They understand now why they can't make more hats right now and why they have to learn a different skill, such as embroidery. And we have some product development ideas. So this happens to be the flip side of Jubilee Spree. These are volunteers in Indianapolis that do the embellishing of the hats, but they're also helping with some new product design. And here's the dream. The dream is that we will be able to use this studio, which was given to us by a local church, to bring in some refugee women and actually do some training here with them. And we'll be sure that we're using everything we've learned as far as lean, training within industry, kata, all of those things that I've just used very lightly, but I know are very beneficial and can be beneficial as we start this other half of the project. Click. And then the next, one of the things we developed out of the middle of the kata egg, we need to have more women who know how to sew. These are sewing machines, treadle sewing machines, because for the most part there is no power in Kenya. And these are beautiful Singer sewing machines that you just happen to buy at a hardware store. Go figure. But we'll be starting up a sewing project here to be able to do products that will be sold other than just the hats at Christmas time. Click. I love this. We did this. I had the kids at one of the schools talk about what they had seen since the Jubilee Village project had come to their village. And for many, 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 many years, they had been told that they were just poor people in the bottom of poverty, and that they were never going to get out of this. They had been, of course, a British colony up until, I think, 1972. So there was that kind of colonist attitude, plus the fact that they didn't really see the assets they had. So we started talking about the assets that they had just between their ears. And this one kid did a picture that says, "Yes, I can." And that's really what we're looking at going forward. We can use what we know. We can be grassroots, but we can accomplish little things that, once you add up, will really mean something to human lives and the transformation. So finally, a little bit of humor never hurts anybody. We believe in humor and respect for people. Humor goes a long, long way. So this is really the end of all I had to say, and I hope you like my story.
Thank you, Lynn. So the fact that you're handing this back over to me and showing this picture is
totally mean that.
Well, thank you to our panel for sharing just a little bit of the highlights of their work in applying lean to situations that have had not only a positive impact, but really a lasting impact. Many of these things we've heard are generational impacts. And again, with respect for people at the heart of what these three individuals are doing. We will provide contact information for each of our panelists in a follow-up email that you'll receive shortly. So if you have any questions for them, would like to get involved with them in any fashion, you will be able to reach out to them. We're also making a recording of this webinar if you would like to review this again, or more importantly, if you'd like to share it with others. And be sure to stay tuned for future installments of our Lean for Good webinar series, where we hope to highlight some of the good work that many of you are doing in the lean community and are currently engaged with. Our hope is that through this series, you'll learn, you'll be inspired, perhaps you'll even adopt an NGO in your local area and begin to do good things. And then maybe perhaps join us in the future as a future panelist on our Lean for Good webinar series. So thanks again very much to the panelists today, and thanks for each of you for joining us. Have a great day and go do good things.